Okay, so now we can go ahead and use the class. As long as the class is in the same folder as where you write your program, you're fine. When you try to compile your program, it's going to find this class in that same folder and then compile that as well, or basically work with that. So let's go ahead and create another file, and this is going to be our program. Okay, so let's go ahead and create the class. Before that, let me just copy and paste the question here. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our class to test the the program to test the class. So I'm going to go ahead and create a public class. I'm going to call this employee class test. Or this is the program. You can test or something. You can call it anything other than employee.java. Let's go ahead and create the main method. Public static void main. Okay, so over here it says okay, let's see. It says once you have written the class, we are done writing the class. So write a separate program that creates 3 employee objects to hold the following data. Okay, so first of all, let's create 3 separate employee objects. Now we have the employee class here, so we're going to create objects from this. Actually, the program didn't say we should test out the constructors, but then it will all work. For this one, I'm just going to try to use this constructor. Actually, I'm going to use this constructor, just to keep it simple. So all the fields are going to be instantiated this way. So let's go ahead and create a couple of objects from this class. So to create the object, I'm going to first of all just put a space here. The name is going to be the name of the class. Type the name of the class, which is employee. I'm creating an employee1 object, an employee object called employee1, and I'm creating a new employee object in memory. Initializing, well, I'm using this constructor, so I'm using the no-arg constructor, passing in nothing. So when I just by passing in nothing, it's going to automatically use the constructor which accepts no arguments, and set the name of this particular employee1 object to nothing, ID number to 0, department to this, and position to this. Just to mix things out, let's go ahead and create another employee. Well, first of all, it's going to create an employee object and then return the memory location of that object to employee1. So employee1 is going to reference this employee object. Okay, let's go ahead and create an employee2 object, but this time initializing it or instantiating it with a different constructor. Okay, so meaning some of the fields are going to be initialized differently. Let's use this, okay, where we are setting the employee name and employee ID number, and then the department is going to be nothing, and position is going to be basically an empty string. So let's set employee2 using that constructor where it's accepting the employee name. So I'm going to give it an employee name. Employee2, I'm just going to use this. So the employee name was Mark Jones, right? So this constructor needs the employee name, Mark Jones, and it also needs the employee ID number. And Mark Jones' ID number is 39119. So 39119. Yeah. Okay. So now, just by creating a new employee object, employee2, and passing in 2 arguments, it's going to know that a string was passed in and an int was passed in. So it's going to go ahead and use this constructor to initialize the fields of the employee2 object. So the employee2 object is going to have this name set to Mark Jones, which we just gave it. Its ID number set to employee number, which is this, which is this. Its department is going to be set to nothing. Its position is going to be set to nothing. And while employee 1 is going to be used as constructor, so its name is set to nothing, ID number set to 0, department set to nothing, position set to an empty string. I mean, all empty strings is except ID number, which is 0. Now let's go ahead and create another employee object. Call it employee 3. And then use the other constructor, just to have a mix of all the constructors. Let's use this constructor where we're giving it everything. We're giving it the employee name, employee ID number, employee department, and employee position. So we're going to create a new employee object in memory. This is basically going to create a new employee object and send or return its memory address or memory location to employee 3. So employee 3 is going to be a variable, a class type variable, a reference variable that is going to hold the memory location of this employee object. Okay, it's going to reference this employee object. Now we are initializing, or we are constructing this employee 3 using this constructor. So meaning we're going to specify the fields, all the fields as arguments. So basically the fields of this employee 3 object are going to be initialized with these values that we're going to give it. So first of all, it needs the employee name. So employee 3 had Joy Rogers, right? So let's do that. Joy Rogers. And the next thing it needs is an employee ID number. So employee ID number is, let's set it to, let's set it to 81774. So 81774. And then the next thing it needs is the employee department. So employee departments, over here it's IT. Actually, it's manufacturing. So let's set it to manufacturing. Now it's a string. We can see ID number is an int. This is a string. The first is a string. So we have string, int, string. String, int, string. And then the last argument it needs is the employee position, which is a string. And the position is an engineer. So let's set that to engineer. So this employee 3 object is going to be created with these fields, okay, initialized. Basically, yeah, with the fields initialized to these values, okay. And these objects, basically, or these variables, these reference variables, are going to hold the memory location of these objects. Basically, these variables, class type variables, are going to reference these objects. Now we can try to display the values or get. Now remember, we set the fields of the class to private, so you can directly just say employee 1, for example, dot name is equal to, let's say, K. You can't do that. It's going to try to complain when I compile this. Let's go ahead and create this, save this program. Actually, when in the same folder, as long as you save this program in the same folder as where the class is, when you try to compile it, it's going to look for the employee class and find it. If it doesn't find it, it's going to complain. But as long as it's in the same folder, that's fine. So employee class test.java, save it. And over here, see, it's trying to complain and telling you that the name of this employee 1 object has private access in employee. It has private access. You cannot directly change it. The only way you can change it is if you use some other way. Now we have a setter, okay, a setter which is public void set name, which is public to this code outside of this class. This is code that is different from this class. It's outside of it. It doesn't belong to this. So this is code that's outside of this class that can use this method, which is public to set the name. Public, all these public methods, basically it can use it. Anything that's public it can use, including the constructors. That's why I didn't complain using the constructors. So the only way we can set the name of, let's say, employee 1 or change it is to use the set name method and then pass in the value. Okay, so let's go ahead and delete this. Well, what I want to do is let's go ahead and display the values of let's take this down. Oh, let's compile this. This is fine. So very good. It's created the object. Let's go ahead and display the values this way, right? So let's just use simple or straightforward system.out.println statement to display them. We will call multiple system.out.println statements. All right, so let's first go ahead and create the header. Okay, the header here, which is going to be the name, ID number, department, and position. Okay, so it's just going to be a regular string name. I'm going to create a tab \t. It's going to be a tab. Okay, so I'm going to actually create, let's create like 2 tabs, and then \t again is actually not again. I mentioned it in another program, so I thought it was this one. All right, so \t is a tab character. When the the compiler sees this, actually interpreter, when the interpreter sees this, it's, I can say compiler, I guess. But Java is compiled to bytecode, so I guess it's a mix of, it's both interpreted and compiled. You can say that. But basically, when it's running this and it sees this \t, it's going to create a tab. The \t and t together is a tab character. Together, no space between them, is a tab character. It's going to create a tab anytime it sees this. So now we have 2 of them. One \t, another \t creates 2 tabs. And then I want to type in the ID number, and then 2 more tabs. Next header is department, and then 2 more tabs, and then the last header is position. Okay. All right, so let's compile this and then let's see how it's displayed. Now we can see that it's created the header down here. So the next thing we have to do is just display the details, right? Let's go ahead and display the details of employee 1, just like that, without setting anything. Let's just try to get, okay. Let's just try to get the value stored in these individual objects. Now again, because the fields in each of these objects are private, if I try to even display it directly, like let's say employee1 system.out.print employee1.name. Let's try that and see. Let's see, system.out.println employee1.name. Right, let's try to compile this. Again, it's going to complain. You can't directly access it because it says because we set it as private. Name has private access in employee. We set it to private. You can't directly change it or even display it. The only way you can display it is to use the getter, the accessor, which is getName, and then that's going to return the name because that's a public method. All right, so let's not use that way to access it. It's private. The only way you can access it is using the getter, the method. So let's go ahead and get the name of the employee. First of all, let's go ahead and compile this. All right, run this. Okay, so it's going to, we want the name to display here. So let's say employee1 dot get name, because that is the method we can use to access that field. So get name is here, and let's get the ID number as well. But before that, let's go ahead and concatenate it with a new line. Oh, sorry, actually a tab. Let's use 2 tabs, or actually 1 tab, since I'm not sure. Let's use 1 tab or 2 tabs. It's fine. And then concatenate with employee1 dot get ID number, because those were all getters we use. So get name, get ID number, get department, and get position. That's what we use to return each of the values stored in each of these objects. So and we are dealing with employee 1, so it's getting the details for employee 1. So employee 1 dot get ID number concatenated with 2 tabs, and then we want employee 1 dot get department, right? So get department concatenated with, now I'm running out of space, so I'll break it somewhere around here. Concatenated with 2 tabs, concatenated with employee 1 dot get position this way. So now, since we have these getHeads, which we defined in the employee class to really access the private fields, we can do that because these methods are public and we can use them to get the fields. It's returning the fields, okay, because these methods are public. So if I compile this and I run, okay, I have an error. Let's see. Cannot find symbol variable get department. Get department. It's a method. So let me I forgot to put parentheses around it. Let's compile this. I did the same thing for this. I forgot to put the parentheses for the argument. Well, it has no argument, but we're supposed to put the departments there because it was a method. We're supposed to put the parentheses there because it was a method. So let's go ahead and compile this, and it runs. And it works. Let's go ahead and run this, and over here we can see it's displaying the details of employee 1. Now, if you could tell the employee 1, okay, we use the constructor the no arg constructor, the constructor that takes in no argument. You use this one, no argument, and in the constructor that takes in no argument over here, which is this one, it set the name to nothing, new line character, the ID to 0, the department to nothing, and then the position to nothing. That's why we are seeing that information for employee 1. Now, if I do the same thing for employee 2, I'm just going to copy this line, change this to employee 2, .get name employee 2, .get ID number employee 2, get departments employee 2, .get position. Now, since we use, now let me just go ahead and compile this and then run it. Now we are seeing, we have to fix the tabs a little bit over here. ID number. Let's go ahead and, so this is okay. Let's go ahead and delete one of these tabs. Compile this and run it. Okay, so the employee 2 used the constructor that accepted the name and the ID number. So we can tell over here, we use this constructor because this constructor accepts the name and the ID number, and it set the name to whatever name we gave it. It set the name to whatever name we gave it. So that's why we're seeing Mark Jones. It set the ID number to whatever ID number we gave it. 39119. That's why we're seeing 39119. And it sets the department to nothing, which is an empty string. That's why we're seeing nothing. And it set the position to an empty string. That's why we're seeing nothing here. So the constructors were working. If I do the same thing for employee 3, now we can see that, well, first of all, let me change it to employee 3 and get the details. We can see that employee 3 accepted 4 arguments, right? So let's just run this. And for employee 3, we can see, well, let me fix the tabs a little bit. This is good. We need to push this a little bit here. So that's for the department. Let's add one more tab here. And hopefully that should fix it. Let's see. Okay, so that's good. So we can see that all 4 values are there for employee 3. We can see that it used the constructor that accepts 4 arguments. This constructor that accepts 4 arguments here, which is this constructor. So it set the name to whatever name we gave it, which is Joy Rogers. We can see Joy Rogers here. It set the ID number to whatever we gave it. Okay, and that's why we can see 81774 here. Set the department, which is manufacturing. Okay, manufacturing department here to whatever we gave it, and that's why we're seeing manufacturing here. And it set the position, which is engineer. Position over here. It set the position we gave it to the position field of that object, and that's why we're seeing engineer here. So we can see these constructors are working. The first employee is missing a name, is missing the department, and missing a position. The second employee, which is Mark Jones, is missing a department and missing a position. Well, they are there, but then they are initialized to nothing, to an empty string. And then Joy Rogers has everything, all the details. We can go ahead and change it. That's where the setters come in. That's where the mutators come in. These are all the getters, the accessors. We're accessing the field using the public methods in the employee class. Now, to change it, or to even to change it or to set the values for these, we can use the setters, right? So we know employee 1 is missing a name, so that's why we can use the set name method, which is over here, for that particular object. Give it a name, pass in a name, and it's going to set the name field of that object to the name that we give it. So let's use the setter for employee 1. Actually, for that class, all the classes have the same method. So let's use the setter to set the name of employee 1. So employee 1 dot set name. It's going to take in, okay, set name over here. Where is it? It's going to take in the name, a name given, and set the name field to the name that we give it. So the name of employee 1 is Susan Myers, right? So Susan Myers over here. So we've set the name using the public method in the employee class to set the private field in that particular object. Okay, to set the private field in that particular object to Susan Myers. So when this program runs again and it's trying to get the name of employee 1, it's been set to Susan Myers. Okay, using the public methods. Now the private fields couldn't be changed directly. We saw that, and we saw that when we tried to say employee 1 dot name is equal to, we couldn't set it directly like that. We had to use the public method, because we couldn't set it because the fields of all the object, or of the class, were set to private. You couldn't change them or access them directly. You had to use the accessors or mutators. Actually, in this case, we had to use the mutators to set them. Yeah, and to use the accessors to get the values in them. So now over here, Susan Myers has been set in the name field of the employee 1 object. So when it tries to guess the name, we will tell, or we can see that it has been changed to Susan Myers. So when we compile this and we run it, we can see that Susan Myers is there. Now let's just shift this a little bit for employee 1. This tab has to go away. Okay, so let's run this again. Okay, so we can see that now Susan Myers is there and everything else is missing. We can use the same method or the same idea to set the ID number of Susan Myers. According to this table down here, ID number is 47899. So we can say employee 1 dot set ID number. Now set ID number is going to take in the ID number we want to set the employee 1 to, 47899. 47899. So we are setting the ID number of the employee 1 object. So let's compile this and then run, and we can see that the ID number has been set for Susan Myers. So let's basically fill in the slot. We have to set a department for Susan Myers, so let's do that. So to type it, but let me just type it. So employee 1 dot set department, and the department, remember the set department method over here, which is over here, takes a string and sets the department field of that object to the department given, the department we give it. So we are setting the department to accountant for Susan Myers, and then we are setting the department for Mark Jones to IT. Now Mark Jones is employee 2, so let's do employee 2 dot set department to IT. Then also we'll have to set the position of Susan Myers, so employee 1 dot set position. Now we know the position method also accepts a string and then sets the position field of that object to the position that we give it. So we are setting the position to, according to the table, vice president. right? Now we've set the employee to department of IT, right? And then its position is a programmer. So employee 2 dot set position, we're setting it to a string, which is programmer. And then I think that's it. Let's compile this and see if all the slots are filled. Okay, I think they're all filled. Let's just adjust this a bit. So the third ones over here need an extra tab. Over here, department, need an extra tab here for employee 2 and for employee 1. Compile doesn't run. Yes, and the second employee 2 needs this tab shifted. Basically the position here. Let's see, employee 2 over here. We need to add one more tab. Okay, so now we can see all the slots are filled. You can compare with this table. You can see all the slots are filled correctly. Susan Myers, yeah. So basically we're done. So notice that over here we use the setters to basically set the fields, okay, because they're private, and we use these public setters or public methods to set the fields, and we use these public accesses, okay, which are also methods to get the fields. Now remember, we set the ID number. We created two methods for that, two setters for that. One accepts an integer, one accepts a string. The one that accepts an integer basically puts an integer in the ID number field. And the one that accepts a string basically puts a string in the in the ID number field by first converting it to an integer. So let's try that. Over here, remember we're setting the ID number of employee 1, which is, who is Susan Myers. We use a string. What if we used, let's say, a string? It's going to now know that it's going to use this setter, because it's going to know that a string was given as an argument, and it's going to use this setter. But it's going to use this setter because it was string. But before it puts it in ID number, it's going to convert it to an integer first. So this is also going to work. We're making the program flexible. So if the user types in a string here, that's fine. So let's run this, and we can see it's still working. It was converted to an integer before putting it in the ID number field of Susan Myers, of employee 1. So we can see it's working. But I'll just leave it as a number, just so you know that also works as well. In that case, since I put an integer, it's going to use this setter because that's an int, and it's going to put that number in the ID number field of Susan Myers or employee 1 or that particular object. So we can test this out more. We can set the values. We can change the we can get the values. Basically those are the methods in the class. And these are the constructors. We use all three of them. We use all the sets. We use the setters, basically most of them, and then the getters. They're the same thing pretty much. So whatever object you apply it to will work, but we use it to fill in the slot because we created we initialized the fields of each of these objects differently. So it had some missing slots. So we had to use the setters to fill in those slots, and use the getters for all of them to get all the information. And you can tell that it's very similar to, actually the same thing as the list here. So I hope it was clear. Chapter 6 is all about classes and object, and that's all we're going to be doing for chapter 6. As actually they are classes and objects are very powerful, and they make your program very organized and simple. Yeah, I hope it helped. This solves the problem. It solved the question. This is exactly what the question needs. Yeah, we did everything that the question asks for. All right, so if you have any questions, please comment down below, and I'll do everything to respond to them. Thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Have a nice night. Have a nice day. Have a good sleep. Have a nice time. And again, take care of yourselves. Thanks for watching. I'm repeating myself. Comments down below if you have questions, and I'll see you next time with the next program. All right, take care. Bye-bye.